There you are.
Okay, so we're good?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, is that your screen I'm seeing then?
Yeah, you can take that.
Okay, there we go. Greetings, everyone. So I'm Todd Byerther. I'm filling in for Andrew Klein today for the IBC Technical Advisory Group for August 18th, 2021. So greetings. So Stephanie, my understanding, greetings. Are you gonna help facilitate, please, to take a roll?
I'm going to do my best.
All right, thank you. Welcome.
Just because good training. So yeah, you just go ahead and read through here. We'll find out
Okay.
who's on the list and we'll do attendance.
And we know Andrew's not here. Charles Cavano.
Oh, no, he's just
No?
highlighted.
Oh, highlighted one. Okay. Susan Kaufman.
Here.
Mark Sniffen.
Present.
John Carlstrom.
Here.
Corey Thomas.
I'm here.
And Todd Bayreuther.
Here?
Bayreuther. My bad. Sorry.
No, thank you. No worries.
Robert Graper. No, Robert. Okay. Chris Seaman. Alan Spalding.
Here.
Okay. And Michael Barth.
Here.
All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and an alternate. Looks like we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Jen.
Chris should be here. I don't, Chris, are you here? I was
I'm here.
just in, oh, okay.
Oh, well, there you go. Christine.
I maybe it was a little quiet.
So,
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that then, we'd like to welcome, tag meetings are fairly open, and we'd like to welcome anyone from the public that would like to be recognized at this time.
Hi there, my name is Leah. I'm with Climate Solutions, just listening in today. Thank you.
Anyone else today? Okay, that was brief. Thank you for that. Second agenda item is to review and approve the agenda. Can we hear a motion to approve, please?
This is Chris. I'll move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Who was the second?
It was me, Sue.
Thank you, Sue. Okay, any discussion or proposed changes? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Hi.
Any opposed, nay, or abstentions? So approved. Agenda item 3, we will review and approve the August 4th minutes. Can we hear a motion to approve, please?
This is Al. I'd motion to approve.
Chris, second.
Thank you, Al and Chris. Okay, any discussion or edits to this document? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, nay, or abstentions? Okay, those are approved. Thank you. Okay, moving straight into agenda item 4 is to review our remaining code change proposals. And I hope, John, can I lean on you to lead that, please?
Yes, yeah, yes, sir. So we
Thank you.
have 2, and I'll go ahead and drive real quick. I'm gonna set this over here. So we've got 2 that are remaining. We've got number 196, and that's tied to the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So they're sort of similar, and then or tied together. And then 143 is the only other one we've got remaining. And I think we're waiting for Eric Vandermeer to show up for that one. I think Andrew was going to reach out. So is Eric here? Doesn't sound like we tabled that one last time just to give Eric a chance to come through. And so it's really up to the process of how you guys want to go through it. If you want to if you want to do 143 and talk about it, and discuss it, and then we can jump into the EV stuff, maybe give Eric time to come. We've tabled that, I think, a couple times, so I'm not sure if Eric's going to show up. It just really depends on really the tag and the chair's discretion. And there's also other topics that are on the agenda from an EV standpoint that we've got Stoyan here that can lend some insight to that. And there's a bigger discussion that we need to go into on House Bill 1287 that we discussed last time, that I think there was some clarification and some other questions that needed to get answered. So we can kind of pick either of those paths depending on which way you guys want to go.
Okay, thank you, John. So I remember Andrew's intent, but this is it, right? We're getting near the end on the ability to continue to table these, correct?
Yes, sir. I mean, we have the ability to continue. So can you guys see you guys can see I can't see the screen right now. You can see that code change proposal log page that I built.
We can, yeah.
Okay. So let's see, we have these other meetings if we need them. So September 1st, that's one if it's necessary. So if we needed to, we could do that. And then we have another one potentially for September 15th if we needed to go that way. But those are the only two proposals we have. Just,
and John, we don't know, sorry to trying to interpret Andrew's intent here. Do we know that if anyone has reached out to Eric?
I know he has. I know Andrew reached out a few times to try to see if Eric could be part of this. So I think if I remember right, if memory serves, I think Andrew said that you guys might just be discussing it anyway.
Or I see Eric joining right now, just as we start to interrupt.
Perfect.
So, so maybe with that, assuming Eric's here to introduce his proposal, I think we just go in order, right? Greetings, Eric. Welcome. This is Todd. I'm filling in for Andrew.
Okay.
And
Sorry, I just joined here a few minutes late.
No, it's perfect. You could not have had better timing. So if you're willing, first of all, we welcome you back. If you're willing to introduce your proposal, otherwise we can stall and go to the other tabled item.
No, yeah, I'm ready to talk about the proposal.
All right, thank you, Eric. We'll give it right away. Give it to you.
Yeah, so if you could just scroll down to the next page so I could see it. Oh yeah, so this is adding a clarifying statement in the code to refer to ASCE 7 for non-structural components, and just to identify on plan sets which components are going to have an importance factor of an IP of 1.5, and that are going to be designed for designated seismic systems. So different jurisdictions are definitely interpreting this section differently and what is required in regards to design for a designated seismic system, but essentially those are systems for components in the building that need to be operational post a seismic event. And so those could be things like smoke control systems or structural stairways that are non-structural stairways, I guess, and emergency generators or other components that are required to operate post a seismic event. And again, every jurisdiction seems to be approaching this a little bit differently. So this doesn't, add any language designating which systems are required to meet that. It just requires that to be identified in the plan set so it can be reviewed. And some jurisdictions are allowing these calculations to be submitted as a deferred submittal when the final equipment is selected. Other jurisdictions want these calculations and things submitted up front. So this is kind of a minimum step to document in the plan set those components that are required to have an IP of 1.5 and required to have that seismic design done for them for non-structural components. So that's the gist of this proposal.
Thank you, Eric. And I'm remembering back to last meeting when you weren't here. Maybe Mike or someone can help me out. I believe, did John Sewer or someone else ask why this is submitted for chapter 16 in this cycle? Is it because it relates to to mechanical code or so forth?
No, it's just, there's been, we've seen, there's been a heightened awareness around this in the last, with certain jurisdictions, asking for more information in regards to this recently. And so we just thought it's, that there is a general statement like in the mechanical code and in the plumbing code. And I believe in NFPA, 70, the electrical code that refers to the building code and chapter 16 for these non-structural components and the seismic design required for them. And so certain jurisdictions have definitely been asking for this in the plan set specifically, and then asking, getting plan review comments that say, you need to provide these tie down calculations, seismic tie down calculations, or indicate that that's going to be a deferred submittal that's provided, during the construction phase of the project. So there's just been more awareness around this, I think, and so we thought it was important enough to add a code amendment to specifically require this in the plan set that's submitted to the city for review.
Okay, no, thank you, Eric. That's definitely helpful on the context. I think maybe I should ask him, am I asking the right question? Is it in the proper group now that we've divided into groups on the IBC?
I think that is your question, Todd. And if I remember correctly, this should be in group 2, because if I remember correctly myself, we voted at the council to align with the ICC structure for group 1, group 2, and the IBC structural would be in group 2.
Got it.
And so I guess, Eric, the question on this, obviously it's in chapter 16, but you're talking about non-structural items, but you're also talking about calculations for structural items. And I suppose the question will be, is this structural and should it be in group 2? I think that's Todd's exact question.
Yeah, if this needs to be deferred to table till group 2 is reviewed, then yeah, I'm fine with that. That's the best way to do that.
I have a question about, it seems to me like this is not a new requirement, it's a pointer, more or less, right? Or it's about construction documents. It's not really about the structural stuff. It's more about administrative stuff and providing documentation, right?
That's correct. This is a requirement that's in ASCE 7. And so this is more of a specific pointer to that, because, a lot of MEP designers out there, aren't dialed into ASCE 7 and what it says. So.
Okay. So I think that might be a way that we could argue that it is appropriate for this cycle. I don't know, Micah, what you think, but it seems more like an administrative section, less of an actual structural section, if it's a pointer to document requirements.
I have a comment. Didn't we last time talk about maybe it belongs in chapter 1, drawing requirements or something like that, that if it was something that was in chapter 1, it would be kind of, it should be reviewed in this part of the code changes, this group. Would you think it could go somewhere moved from chapter 16 to chapter 1? Do you see that, Eric?
Yeah, potentially. I'm trying to remember which section in the mechanical code refers to this.
Oh, I was thinking of the IBC, but
yeah, I'm just saying. So I think the mechanical code refers you to chapter 16, maybe specifically, but I'm not I could review that and get back to the tag on that.
Sue,
This is Micah.
go ahead. Go ahead, Micah.
I was gonna say, I wouldn't recommend putting this in chapter 1 just because so many jurisdictions are able to modify and create their own chapter 1. And this may get modified, left out, not included. So that would be a recommendation there. And I guess my question, Eric, would be on item number 1. You're just identifying all the non-structural components on the plans as having that. That's not an actual calculation that you have to provide. Is that correct?
Correct. And the intent here was to identify in the plan set all components that have to have an IP of 1.5 for ASCE 7 and have to have a designated seismic design system for ASCE 7. So the way we typically do that is we have a list of like our mechanical equipment on the plan set, and it says these components are designed to an IP of 1, and these are designed to an IP of 1.5, and then we delegate the actual seismic tie down calculations to the contractor. And in certain cases, or certain jurisdictions, we provide those reference. Doesn't refer directly to chapter 16. So it just says for seismic design requirements, see the building code.
Okay. Thanks.
To Sue's question about using chapter 1, chapter 1, when it's talking about submittal documentation, bounces you back to 16 for what to provide. So it probably does make sense to land in 16 with all the rest of it. But then I guess the question does remain, is it a structural requirement for group 2, or is it a administrative requirement where we could talk about it now?
I mean, my opinion is that it should go with group 2 because there may be some other considerations that you need to look at for other things in chapter 16. I just think it's better to group it together when you're looking at that, any other structural requirements. But that's my opinion.
Eric, it sounds like you'd be okay with that. Mrs. Todd?
Yeah, I'd be fine
Okay.
with the, yeah, if that's, we can table this till group 2's, that's fine with me. Yes, correct.
Any other TAG members opposed to that idea?
This is Mike Barth. I'm not opposed to it, but I would have one kind of code structure suggestion. Here we've got essentially the scope 1613.1, and then we have a list of exceptions, and then we have this new sentence or new paragraph. Typically to follow exceptions like that, you would start with a different section. And so I would almost suggest that this be created as a separate subsection, 1613.1.1, something to kind of give that break from the exceptions. And again, has nothing to do with the technical aspects, but just from a code structure standpoint.
Yeah, and in the same, to follow up with what Mike's saying, I think 1603 would be a better home for it because that is the documentation section. And it could live with all the other stuff about how you're supposed to document things.
Yeah, good point.
I agree.
Yeah, so yeah, I could resubmit it later with those changes.
Okay. Well, that's productive. Any other comments? So help me, what's the official action here? We're
Yeah, that would be so Stoyan, I guess from a procedural standpoint, would this be one that would he just rescind it, or would we?
Yeah, I could withdraw it and then resubmit it under group 2.
Yeah, this is the best option.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll just officially withdraw this and then resubmit. Okay.
okay. Well, thank you, Eric. So no other action then by the tag necessary?
Well, if it's withdrawn, then there is no need
Okay.
for a special action from the TAC.
Well, Eric, thank you. Withdrawn with feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So then, if I understood correctly, by the way, John, this web page is great. This log online is great. So to everyone who did that. If I heard you correctly, then we would move on to 427. Is that correct?
The next one is up on the screen. So we're at 196.
196, referring to this, 427. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, quick question. I thought that Andrew was going to ask if Kathleen Petrie could be here to talk about this proposal. That was our discussion last time, is that it would be nice to have her input while we were looking at this, but anyway.
And also, this proposal needs to be evaluated in conjunction with HB 1287, what the council is required to do following HB 1287.
Okay, so is the recommendation here that we table this once again and move into the agenda item 5? Since we do not have Kathleen here, but also we need to review HB 1287 first.
Sounds like we have to compare this proposal to see how it might fit in with that. And that sounds like homework. So we probably want to assign homework.
As a personal opinion, it's important, what or how far the TAC wants to go with 1287 and the existing language in section. Actually, it's not 427, it's 429. We renumbered it based on some renumbering in the model code. My point here is that there are some existing issues with the EV charging requirements, and I'll mention only 3. Everybody is saying it's not enforceable because of Department of Labor and Industries involvement in the enforcement here. And there were some issues with the load management system, the language for the load management system, and also this text related to employee parking. This is 3 I can remember. So it's again 1287 versus some existing issues and this new proposal. It depends how far the TAC members wants to go with this proposal.
Okay, so in my hearing, let's talk about 1287 first. Let's table this temporarily during this meeting, or perhaps till next meeting. But let's talk about 1287 and come back to it if it's a desire of the tag.
It seems reasonable to me.
Okay. Okay, if there are no objections, then let's do that. I'm sorry, maybe I'll ask first. John, we didn't have any other code change proposals under agenda item 4, correct?
No, sir. That was it.
Okay.
Just those 2.
Okay, thank you. So then let's move the meeting into agenda item 5, discuss the House Bill 1287 with Stoyan. Are you going to lead that, please?
Yes, I can share some information. So 1287, there are 3 steps with it. So what exactly HB 1287 requires? Let's keep aside R3 for a little bit. So when we read 1287, what exactly 1287 requires, I was a little lost, a little confused because I couldn't find the reference documents and the reference entities. However, Annabelle sent us a really nice and very helpful email the other day, so I want to use it now. Can you? Okay. So you can read the email. The zero emission vehicle program requirements are part of the motor vehicle emission standards adopted by the Department of Ecology, and this is what I was having hard time finding. However, the first bullet point kind of clarifies what the requirement is, and evaluating what 1287 is asking the council to do and what we currently have. The council just adopted requirements for 10%, plus another 10% for EV ready and plus 10% for EV capable parking spaces. So the question here is there a need for additional modifications to the current language? I don't have the answer. It's just a question for discussion.
Todd, you see Leah's got her hand up. Maybe she has some input.
Yes, hi, thank you. I did want to flag as well that ecology is sort of undergoing rulemaking for the zero emissions vehicles mandate that Annabelle discussed in bullet point number 1. But the rulemaking that's going to happen in 2022, we are statutorily obliged to follow California standards. They're currently undergoing rulemaking for another round, and it's going to require 100% sales of zero emissions vehicles for passenger vehicles by 2035. So I did want to flag that 8% requirement for 2026. That is going to rapidly accelerate based on what California is doing. And again, Washington has to follow California standards once they are adopted. So California is in the process of adopting those, and then we will be adopting those here. So again, just wanted to flag that that requirement is very, very quickly going to ramp up in terms of required EV sales in Washington.
I have a comment. It seems like, buildings have to be around for many, many years after they're built. And so, if we're talking about something, in 2035, that's not very far away as far as building a building now. So it seems like we should kind of be looking for what's going to happen in the next 20 to 30 years in terms of for a building as far as capable, at least.
So here there are two different requirements. So the first one is whatever we have now, and there is an exemption for R3 occupancies, and based on 1287, this exemption no longer exists. So we will be adding R3 occupancies to the 10% that we already have. There is another option. Again, this is for discussion purposes. I don't have the answer, but there is a text again that everybody felt it's not sufficiently clear. This is for the employee parking. If the requirement for 10% EV ready and 10% EV capable applies to all parking spaces, not exactly for employee parking only, then this exceeds the percentage as well. Again, don't take this as a direct recommendation. I'm just sharing some options for discussion purposes.
Okay, that amendment or that proposal that we tabled gets into that employee parking exemption too. Some just a heads up that we're talking about it there too.
Yeah, and just a comment, City of Tacoma, we amended this section ourselves and are enforcing some higher requirements. And in terms of not just employee parking, because we felt that it was very problematic to try to figure out, especially you build a strip mall, well, how many of those spaces are for employees, or, it's too hard to really determine on that front end when you're doing plan review, employee parking versus, overall parking. So anyway. It's just kind of like the provisions for live work, employees versus non-employees, how many people can be in there. So
You mentioned California, and I wanna. You all know I came from California, and I was the one working in the EV requirements in 2013. So I want to share my good and bad experience with it. What happened in California? There is 100% requirement for EV capable charging equipment for 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhouses. And there was a big opposition when it was adopted. However, based on the fact that the California Energy Commission is requiring 200 amps electric service panels, there wasn't any issue with it. Everybody is complaining. It just adds one additional 40 amp receptacle outlet and additional circuit. There wasn't big of a deal with it. What California failed with was to provide data to run a study specifying how many of these EV capable spaces were converted to EV ready spaces. So there wasn't a comparison tool to figure out if increasing the percentage for EV capable spaces helps increase the percentage for EV ready spaces, if it makes sense what I'm saying. The other thing was that the number of EV ready and EV capable spaces was evaluated as an average statewide. Well, in California is the same as in Washington. There are cities that will exceed the minimum requirements. For example, in California, Palo Alto, where Tesla is, they have 100% requirement. So this changes the average number. So it's not an easy task to develop, EV charging requirements, but this is where we are.
And then also, Chair, I want to let you know, Annabelle is here and has her hand raised.
Thank you. I was just going to recognize that. Annabelle, please jump in anytime.
Thanks, and Stoyan, that was helpful background. I think to one of your original questions was like, is 10% EV capable and EV ready enough to meet these the motor vehicle emission standards kind of requirements, and how many EVs that's going to accelerate in the state, or EV adoption is going to accelerate in the state? I would say that the 10% is probably not enough to meet that. And so the question, I think, for this group, and I'm not totally sure how the structure of the State Building Code Council works, is what is enough to meet those requirements. And so I think that this group's going to have to figure that question out.
Okay, thank you, Annabelle.
And I guess I would just add that my understanding is also that right now there are no requirements for residential, or maybe someone could correct me on that.
Currently, there is no requirement for R3 occupancies and 1 and 2 family dwellings built under the residential code. And my question or comment was, what I was going to ask was, so now if the TAC and the council having the final vote decides to require 100% compliance for 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhomes and R3 occupancies, which seems to be the direction from HB 1287, how much it will increase the 10%? Because the 10% is for all parking spaces, but R3 and 1 and 2 family dwellings. So on a statewide, this will increase the percentage for available EV charging spaces. Doesn't matter, EV capable or EV ready. We don't have this data to compare. We don't have any study. We don't we don't have the information.
So this is Micah. Under our current requirements, we're actually not getting EV infrastructure for Group A, Group E, or Group M unless there's designated employee parking. So really, we're not getting it for 4 separate occupancy groups at any percentage, much less a 10% or 50% or 100%. So that's something we need to recognize of what the current code says, what we have modified it to, which is under the CR 104 at this time. I believe it's CR 104, Stoyan.
CR 103 is
For the
being
modification
filed.
being made.
103.
103, okay. And so I think that, yes, we understand what the goal is to get these EVs up and operational, at least the infrastructure available. But Annabelle, you indicated that it's the TAG's duty to determine the percentage that's necessary. And I'm not sure that would be the case. I think the TAG's duty would be to evaluate the code language and recommend code language to the full building code council. But if you're asking us to determine the appropriate percentage, I'm not sure that that would be our primary responsibility.
Yeah, I'm not
Okay.
fully familiar with, the difference between what the TAG's role is, and how kind of the whole building code process works. But I think ultimately in incorporating new EV infrastructure requirements, I think that percentage will have to increase to meet the direction of HB 1287. And so whether it's the TAG or another group that has to determine what an appropriate percentage is, I guess I'm not totally familiar with the process, but ultimately, I guess I'm just trying to say is that there will have to be a determination of like an increased percentage to meet 1287's requirements.
Sure, we're trying to increase that. Like I said, the one we rewrote based on language from the previous legislative package was limiting at best. Unfortunately, legislative language does not always equate to effective technical code language that can be enforced. And that was brought up several times through the meetings. Again, the current legislation in 1287 talks about just removing R3 as an exception. Well, R3 under the technical requirements of the building code does not capture 1 and 2 family dwellings or townhouses. Those are found in the residential code and are not classified as an R3 structure unless the designer chooses to build those out of the building code. So right now, what I'm indicating is the legislation is lacking on direction, and the direction they do provide as limited enforcement possibilities under technical code language. So we're kind of between a rock and a hard place is what I'm getting at.
I can't remember if I share. I think I did. I did share this information with the TAG, but I will repeat it again. And again, it will be the council's decision which way the council members want to go. The bill 1287 talks about R3, so it eliminates the exception for R3. And because it wasn't clear what the intent was, and coordinating with our Assistant Attorney General, we reached out to the legislature for additional information. What we got an email from Senator Doss. I think I'm saying her name right. And we listened to the recordings, the meeting on the Senate floor. Everybody was talking about 1 and 2 family dwellings. So they eliminated R3, but I guess the intent was 1 and 2 family dwellings. And as you know, the politicians, they're not technical experts. But again, Micah is right. The bill doesn't really clarify the intent.
I guess that it does, and maybe you all have a slightly different interpretation of section 4, subsection 3A, but subsection 3A does say that the rules adopted under this section must exceed the specific minimum requirements for all types of residential buildings and commercial, but it does provide that direction. So I'd be interested in your take on that, as well as obviously you listen to the 4 speeches, and it certainly appears that the intention was for single family homes as well.
I think that's kind of the issue. This is Micah again. The issue is I agree with you there. It says all kinds. It's not clear to me on which section would apply. When you eliminate an R3, we understand, I'm not disputing the intent, and I'm actually fine with moving it forward. In Seattle, we have done the same already. Unfortunately, we don't put it in the building code. We put it in the land use code and the electrical code where it belongs. And so that's kind of what the legislation, when I was talking about it limits our ability to create enforceable language that's very clear because of some of the requirements there. If that's the indication that it needs to be all types of residential, and that's exactly what they want to do, then we can look at that and provide some level of code change in the residential code to do so. But it's just, that was the question on the intent, and that's why Stoyan and staff went through and looked at the videos and listened to testimony and things like that. So I have no problem trying to make changes. I think it needs to be clear what they're trying to do. And if we're talking about the percentages, they're trying to establish percentages in the legislation, but at the same time, you need to meet, whatever you're going to do to meet the minimum. So we just need to work on it. What we're here for.
What if we eliminate the text for employee parking? This will increase the percentage as a big number, because currently it says employee parking, but you all know that the employee parking is not necessarily assigned and identified. So for any occupancy that doesn't have employee parking, although the code is saying 10%, well, there is nothing identified.
Yeah, I agree. We can be more strict. We can have higher thresholds, right, than the bill, and still meet the requirements of what they're asking us to do, right? So I would be all for that. It's also easier to enforce. Count the number of stalls, 10%.
We also spent some time trying to understand what the intent behind employee parking was, but we couldn't find anything.
That seems like low-hanging fruit to me, that would be easy to tackle, at least for the IBC.
And then, there's still the question of the single family versus R3, but right now we're talking building code. So we can fix that by just removing the exemption for R3 and then giving the council a heads up that it needs to be brought up again when the IRC tag meets.
So this is Todd. I agree with that. And so is that we'll take action with what we can today, but then also make a recommendation to make sure that this is flagged for the BFP and the council.
I think so, right? Does that sound like that makes sense?
I have a question. So taking action, the council would go back and make changes to the code language and bring it back to the tag? Is that the action that would be taken based on these recommendations to remove the employee parking exception?
That's the IBC action, correct?
Sorry, I thought we did that last meeting, Todd, when Andrew was here. They removed the
Probably. Thank
R3
you.
section that we had modified in the 103.
I don't think we took out the employee parking requirement.
Maybe not, but I think that question was the concern, would we be, I think we had some concerns about what was in the legislation and what it actually said based on what we would put in the code language.
Mike, are you referring specifically to the employee parking?
Yes.
Comparing the old.
Among
bill-
other things,
I'm
sorry, I
sorry.
was gonna say among other things, because I think we did something similar with the load management language. Like there were some concerns about how that was written because it was put in the legislation. We just more or less copied it over. And there were some concerns from L&I on the enforcement of that language. And actually who's going to enforce it as well, since it's in the building code and not in the electrical code.
Okay, moving this forward then, is there a specific action, a motion someone would like to propose regarding the IBC? And what I'm understanding is specifically related to employee parking?
I think we're trying to figure out whether we can propose that as an action to remove the employee parking exception. Is that something that the TAG can propose?
That's a great question. See, I was also going to ask, do we have the language that was worked on from the last TAG meeting? Can be shown?
Yeah, I guess which language specifically?
I believe it was the actual code language for 429.
Oh, this here, you mean? No, this is 427.
Yeah, 429 is at on the bottom.
Yeah. So this is,
This was just adopted, and the effective date, I think, is August 29.
Yes, I think that's the language.
It looks like John put in the chat kind of what I asked earlier about if we go beyond what they ask for, aren't we? We're still doing what we're supposed to do or better.
Well, I have a comment. I mean, if we feel that the code requirement for employee parking is unenforceable, it's not something that a jurisdiction could really easily plan, review, and enforce, then I think that would be kind of part of our technical advisory capacity, is that, we're recommending it's an unenforceable provision.
Yeah, and I would agree that it is not enforceable. Even harder to enforce than the infrastructure itself.
Just because I'm new to some of this, can someone explain why their interpretation or their opinion is that it's not enforceable?
Well, it's our interpretation that it's extremely difficult to enforce from what our roles are as building officials, because the building code itself does not require the parking to begin with, nor does it say what parking is for employees versus visitors. That's typically a land use thing. Like Micah said, I don't credit Seattle often with doing something right with codes, but they did something definitely right there where they got it in the land use code and their electrical code. Just practically speaking, from the people that are asked to enforce it, it is extremely difficult to enforce. And it's unenforceable when we have to make sure that stuff is designated as employee parking versus visitor parking or guest parking.
It's just, that's not something that, I mean, as a business changes, I mean, maybe they, a new business moves in there and they're not changing any of the building code items, so they don't need a building permit. But they maybe have a lot more employees. So should they be required to put in more employee parking? Again, it just doesn't seem like something that as building officials, we really have the capacity to be able to enforce when a building is being constructed or modified, remodeled.
Hey, recommendations to move forward?
Guess if we're looking for recommendations to maybe edit what's in front of us and move it forward, I would recommend that we strike the exception for employee parking because it's unenforceable.
Yeah, last time, didn't we cross out R3? So we X'd out that, and that's what I was remembering. Cross out R3, and now we're the proposal that Chris just made is to cross out the exception for employee parking.
Seems correct. Is that everyone's understanding?
So are you moving that, Chris? You moved to?
Or that's what I'm recommending. So yeah, if we could scroll down there to see where the language is. We still have the other proposal in to discuss where we could work with the proponent to get the language where we want it. So right now, I think I would move that we strike group R3 and or from exception number 1.
So, yeah. But don't we want to not require it for exempt group U? So we can still exempt group U, right?
Correct. Yeah. So I would just say occupancy is classified as group U.
Right.
And remove the other language.
So cross out group R-3 in item number 1. And then on item number 2.
I don't know if you want to do that. This is John. Sorry, I'm going to jump in here. If you did that, then your private garage, the detached private garage will not get this, even if it with the R3.
Oh, I see what you're saying, John.
So we need to clarify.
So we need to say what it applies to instead of saying what's exempted.
Private
is what I say. So we need to say it's for group A, group B, group E, group R, and their accessory structures or something like that. Does that make sense?
You might not want to write code on the fly here.
No, I agree. Yeah. I'm just trying to talk through it, but it seems to me that instead of saying it applies to everything and exempting out stuff, we should say what we want it to apply to and align it to the bill.
The question is, do we want it to apply to everything? Do we just cross out the exceptions? Or where should exceptions apply? What is appropriate as an exception that we wouldn't want to require it?
Yeah, you want it to apply to single purpose parking as well as accessory parking, no matter what, it seems to me. I mean, that seems to be the way things are headed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. And I think that's what Annabelle was mentioning in their report, was that they want to look at 100% emission or EV vehicles by a certain time frame, well, we need to provide infrastructure for that. So it would, at this point, this would apply to all parking, and you're only going to get that percentage of that entire parking anyway.
So there'd be no exceptions, correct?
It seems like that would be the way to go, but I think is what John was indicating is we don't necessarily want to write code on the fly, but yes, you would get rid of the exception. But in my opinion, you would really have to rewrite the scope of 429.1.
Yeah, so maybe if we can on the fly figure out the idea of what we want to put together and then assign homework is what I would recommend.
I agree. This is Todd. So is our role as a tag is obviously to establish this intent and to move it forward to the BFP. Do we need to have the exact language before we move it forward to the BFP, or can we give the narrative so that we pull that together at the next step?
I would say it's strongly recommended if the tag end up with a proposal, something, because keep in mind the BFP is currently with 3 members.
Agreed. Okay. Okay. So what I'm hearing then is we have homework we will make a recommendation now, and we're going to revisit this next tag meeting, correct?
Yes, and I can help with crafting the language if I get a clear direction of where do we want to go.
Okay.
It might be helpful to also ask if Kathleen Petrie could attend the next meeting, just for comment. We wouldn't necessarily have to review her proposal, but she might have some good insight because obviously she's pretty well versed having put that proposal together. So she might be a good person to provide some input.
Can anyone on this meeting address some of the proposal as it relates to our conversation right now? Stoyan, I guess I'm asking, do we want to just talk about these two together? If we're framing what homework needs to be done for next tag for both this legislative intent and for
okay,
proposal.
so I can compare with this proposal. I forgot the number, but I want to ask for a little help if I can have a second opinion on that.
Is that desirable by anyone else?
My point is, I will craft the language based on your recommendation. I'll compare with the proposal that we then discuss, but I would need a second opinion. So whatever I have, I will send it to somebody, and I just need a second opinion. I don't trust myself sometimes.
We have we have a gal in our environmental group who helped with our EV internal proposal that we did a couple of years back, and she may be able to provide some input on that. So if you could send it to me, I could. It's Beth Jarrett. She's pretty up to speed on that kind of thing.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay, this is Todd. Is everyone okay with that? Do we feel like we made some progress today through the discussion of employee parking? Where we're all clear on what we intend to review and what Stoyan is going to prepare for next time. Thank you, Stoyan. I guess my ask would be, in addition, can we form a recommendation if we do believe this tag recommends that the IRC is synced with this, with removing R3, that we do intend to that we interpret the legislation as also applying to the future IRC consideration?
I have one question about the R3 versus 1 and 2 family dwellings, and I don't want to make it difficult for you, but I want to clarify it in advance before we potentially get in trouble. So R3 will remove R3. I think I have some idea. I can have a proposal for the residential code. My issue is, and I will try to explain my issue by a question. So if I'm building a 3-story single family dwelling and I want to follow the International Building Code, and I don't see anything here related to R3, which set of technical requirements I can follow? Following what we have currently in R29, I don't see anything related to single family dwelling. The requirements will be in the residential code. So my question for you is it beneficial if we have a reference in the building code, like for 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhouses, whatever the language will be, just refer to the residential code?
If we end up with companion language that lives there, I suppose that would make sense. So if we do get a proposal, well, not we, because it'll be the IRC tag, right? But if something makes it in the IRC that specifically addresses infrastructure for 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhomes built to the IRC, I think it would be appropriate to, in the scope that we're writing, that you said you're going to start and talk with Sue about, it would be appropriate to have an exception that said buildings constructed to the IRC, C whatever.
Okay.
I think that would be appropriate. I know we don't normally do that, but it's there's been enough differing application of this code section, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, that it probably makes sense to have pointers.
I will add the pointer, and next time, if you don't like it, we will eliminate it.
Sorry, Chris, were you recommending putting a pointer from the residential code to the building code?
No,
No, the other way around.
other way around, having something specific in the residential code when they get there that says this is how you have EV ready for a single family home or duplex or townhouse. And then saying that if you're saying here in 429, it's going to be, I guess, but saying here in the scope of it that if you are building to the IRC, go see the requirements in the IRC. I think it'd be better to have those specific requirements there, because we're also talking about a much different setup, right, Stoyan? We're talking about that 40 amp plug and
Yes.
not a bunch of stalls with infrastructure ready to go.
Yeah, that was my point. Yes.
Yeah, and then that keeps, I totally agree for all the reasons. And because that keeps that other weird thing out of this section that maybe would confuse it even more, right? If we put the IRC, how to do it in here, that would confuse the subject even more in the building code when we could just push it off to the IRC.
I can agree with that. My only issue, and of course, this is coming from being on the council. I do have some concerns with the council proposing language to require EV infrastructure for 1 and 2 family dwellings, because it's not clear in the legislation. I understand that's the intent, but I mean, we got a lot of pushback on the proposal to provide spaces for heat pump water heaters in 1 and 2 family and just one electrical, 20 amp outlet for those at the state level. And that was not a building code council proposal. That was brought in by somebody else. So that's a real concern of mine, is this is going to appear that the state building code council is pushing to have infrastructure requirements in 1 and 2 family dwellings for EV, when that should come from legislation, and the legislation is not clear. So I'm just voicing my concerns to the tag, because I'm not sure that it's good precedent to have language developed by the building code council for something that's not clear in legislation. If it comes from a third party, like Kathleen, if we take that proposal and we build upon that, if she brings that back in for residential, then that's what we do. But I have some real concerns about this coming from the State Building Code Council as a proposal. And having Stoyan work on that. Sorry, Stoyan.
It's
I'm
okay.
trying to keep you working on
I will
stuff, but,
follow, I
that
will
was-
follow the recommendation, whatever it is.
So Micah, this is Todd. I thought our interpretation was that was the legislative intent. So you disagree with that?
I'm not saying that it's not the intent. I just, it's not exactly clear. I have some concerns with the State Building Code Council coming in and making the language. I really think that the legislation should be clear that this shall apply to 1 and 2 family dwellings, and that, you know, the dissatisfaction from the home builders should be pointed to the legislators and not the State Building Code Council is writing code that affects them drastically.
Mike, I share your concern, obviously, as a council member, and I think that in my mind strengthens the need for the tag as a group of stakeholders to make a recommendation either way, and then hopefully move it into the public process where we can get official testimony from other stakeholders. Is that a valid strategy?
I think it is. The question to me is, are we going to do that for the residential code and put that through as an actual proposal? I'm fine with what's going on in the commercial code and removing R3. That's not the issue for me. I think the question is, are we being specifically directed to incorporate this into 1 and 2 family, and has that been appropriately vetted through legislature?
I see. And I think another way to ask a related question is it the authority of this tag to make that recommendation to the IRC anyway? But I think maybe it can be a narrative that goes along with the action in the IBC, correct?
Certainly.
Okay.
Well, the issue, the connection to the residential code right now is, what we were talking about, reference to the residential code. So the proposal can go with or without the reference. If the tag feels that it's too much to ask for, I will keep the reference to residential code out. When we get to the residential code, at the same time, we will be working on the structural provisions in the building code. So there is, I think, time for some final changes to the non-structural provisions if it requires additional modifications, if it makes sense what I'm saying.
I think it does. And I think my point is to have that documentation that this was discussed at the IBC tag for that possibility next year in group 2, that would be our recommendation, our preloaded recommendation from the IBC tag if that were to occur on the IRC. Anyone else agree or disagree?
I guess I have a comment. So if that doesn't happen, I mean, if we're putting a pointer to something at this point in the IBC to something that isn't actually in the IRC yet, I kind of have concerns. I mean, it seems like we should develop whatever we think we need in the IBC, including any R3 requirements, as one package, and then if necessary, down the road, it could get moved into the IRC. But at this point, we have to kind of work with what we are working on right now with the IBC, and can't just count on, well, hopefully there'll be something in the IRC that looks good. I just think that it needs to be, in encompassing in the IBC at this point. That's my opinion.
No, I agree, Sue. And I think I'm mainly advising that when next year, when this potentially gets discussed at the IRC level, Stoyan will be able to reference back to notes in this discussion that this is memorialized somehow, that this was our interpretation as an IBC tag.
So that I'm understanding right, and I'm new at all. So you're saying that there's independent language in both the IBC and the IRC instead of just pointers? Sue, is that what you mean?
Yeah, at this point, I just, if the language is not already in the IRC for us to point to, I just have a hard time for us saying, okay, here you go. Here's something that points to something that doesn't exist. I just think that we need to, here's the package, and it's all together, and it's in the IBC, including whatever language for R3. And then at the point that, so just consider the R3, which is associated in the IBC. And then if, in the IRC, once things move to the IRC, develop that, you have a kind of a base. So yeah, they could exist separately at first, and then the State Building Code Council could decide that, hey, we're just going to put a pointer in later. But I just would say that at this point, we need to, if we're recommending, if our interpretation is legislation is intending to have this apply to R3, then we just deal with our swim lane, which is the R3 as referred to by the IBC. And we remove, if we're going to accept that, then we would put provisions for the IRC, or excuse me, for R3 in the IBC.
Okay. Thank you for that. Makes sense.
This is Mike Barth. I agree with Sue in that regard, but I also agree with Micah in that it's difficult if it's being pushed by the Building Code Council as opposed to coming from the outside industry. And it really boils down to, I think, figuring out scope. I mean, it's regardless of any of the technical pieces, there's no agreement on scope. And it's almost like we have to start at square one and figure out the scope of what we want this to apply to. Because even when it comes down to like group A, group M, do we need charging stations at a restaurant it's very understandable for the group R's, where people sleep, but where you stop for 10 minutes to pick up groceries or to go to church or to go to Safeway or Red Robin, do you need charging stations at all those for every 10-minute stop? And I think that is where scope really needs to be hammered out, because it's been suggested essentially, let's put this everywhere, but do we really need it everywhere? Or do we need it where just in the places where people park overnight? So again, my 2 cents worth on it, that may not help with anything, but I think that's where the whole discussion needs to start, is with the scope.
Thank you, Michael. Lee, would you like to feel free to jump in?
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to flag, and this is from sort of my participation on the legislative side and with the legislature on, similar bills, but I think the intent is that there needs to be ample public charging. It is inadequate to only have it at residences. We've taken part in a lot of different studies about charging profiles and about how utilities conserve loads, working with different utilities on transportation electrification plans. And there's a real need for it to be in public places for folks who don't have their own garages, and also to smooth the load, frankly, so everybody's not charging at the same time. So I just wanted to put that out there, like in terms of what is adequate for an electric vehicle future, we do need those ample public chargers at workplaces, at public spaces, in order to make sure that not everybody's charging at the same time, and in order to provide charging for those folks who might not have their own designated parking space overnight. So just from like an EV perspective, that's what would be needed for the future.
Okay, thank you. Okay, bringing us together, are we converging on an understanding of what we need to do in the action on the IBC for striking certain exceptions and the employee parking? And then we're in agreement that regarding the residential code, perhaps more guidance is needed, and perhaps even clarity with legislation in next session, which will happen by the time the residential code would be considered.
That sounds right to me. So our action today is that Stoyan is going to work on additional language that would address R3 and scope, which would be inclusive, which we think might exclude the employee parking exception. So he's going to bring back some language. He can coordinate with me and for some input through our sustainability person, Beth, and then in 2 weeks we'll come back with something. Is that right, Stoyan?
Yes. In what I still don't understand, I guess, I'm trying to listen carefully, but so I will eliminate the exception for R3, which is okay. But if I don't add provisions for R3, technical provisions, then what? So we'll try to clarify the scoping, but we'll end up with no technical provisions for R3, because what we currently have don't work for all R3 provisions. For example, R3 is buildings that do not contain more than 2 dwelling units. So what's
I think, Stoyan, I think you would be adding provisions for R3 in this proposal, in this.
I would be, okay.
Yes.
I got it.
That's my understanding, is it's going to be an all-inclusive package, which would eliminate R3 as an exception and then put those provisions in for R3.
Okay, got it.
Okay, is that clear as as we can get? We will be addressing this again in the next meeting then. And now, does that also include, Stoyan, some coordination with the proposal by Kathleen?
Yes, I will try to evaluate her proposal as well. Yes.
Okay, and invite her if necessary next session, next meeting. Okay. Okay, is that satisfactory to everyone for today's meeting? It's healthy, thank you. Is there any action we've missed on those recommendations, or is that enough, Stoyan, to move forward? So really we're tabling again. Okay. And then I get to hand to Andrew for next time. So thank you, everyone. Good discussion.
And then Stoyan, on this, I guess just from a procedural standpoint, do we need to specifically state that we're tabling these, or what's the procedural part of that?
If everybody agrees we're tabling it, then I don't see. Todd may correct me if I'm wrong.
No, just President, are there any objections? Okay, hearing none, it is tabled. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Okay, thank you, everyone. So, so with that, I assume then there's no need to go back to agenda item 4 for consideration of that. We've also moved that to next meeting also. Okay. With that, we're on agenda item 6 for the meeting, other business. Is there any other business? Okay.
Do you
Hearing
have a
none.
date for the next meeting?
Go ahead, Micah.
Do you have a date for the next meeting?
Yeah, I saw it on.
Yes, it is September 1st, I believe. That's also on the IBC site. So the upcoming meetings are all listed there. I'll move it over here.
Okay, thanks. I missed it. My fault. Thanks.
And it said, I put this really super nice thing in here that just says it'll be there if necessary. So that is the next one. And then if we need, there is also another one there on the 15th.
Keep in mind that there is a BFP, additional BFP standing committee meeting on August 27th.
Yes.
So at least half of the proposals, or more than half, will be discussed there, and the EV proposal and a few others will be discussed on September 16th. So we still have time.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. September 1st, date certain. And then, okay, any other business? Last call? Okay, can we hear a motion to adjourn then, please? Or can I simply adjourn?
Yeah.
I see Soren laughing
I move to
therefore.
adjourn.
All right,
Second.
moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.